The spice rack in your kitchen is one of the biggest scams in the grocery store. Let that sink in for a second. That little $8 jar of garlic powder sitting in your cabinet right now, the actual cost to produce what's inside that jar is somewhere around 35 to 40 cents, maybe less. That premium Italian seasoning blend they're charging you $5 or $6 for, it's dried herbs. That's it. Dried herbs they bought in bulk for almost nothing, shoved into a tiny glass jar with a fancy label, and put on a shelf next to a dozen other tiny glass jars that all cost you a fortune. I want you to think about how many spices you buy in a year. Garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, cumin, chili powder, taco seasoning, Italian seasoning, the list goes on. A lot of households spend $100, $150, even $200 a year just on spices. And a significant chunk of that money is not going toward the actual spice. It's going toward the cardboard box, the glass jar, the plastic lid, the label design, the advertising budget, the retail markup, and the profit margin of a billion-dollar industry that is betting you won't ever figure out how to do this yourself. Well, today you're going to figure it out. I'm going to show you exactly how to make your own spices at home. We're talking garlic powder, onion powder, chili powder, paprika, cumin, Italian seasoning, everything bagel seasoning, taco seasoning, all of it, from scratch, with real ingredients, for a fraction of what you're currently paying. And the best part? What you make at home is going to taste better than anything sitting on that store shelf, by a long shot. The industry has been counting on you not knowing this. That ends today. My name is Dale Porter. I've spent the better part of 20 years figuring out how to eat well without giving my paycheck to a grocery store or a food corporation. I grew up watching my grandfather do things the old way, curing his own meat, growing his own vegetables, making his own seasonings. Nothing fancy, just practical knowledge that somehow got lost between his generation and ours. I've been sharing what I've learned here on this channel for a while now, and every single week I hear from people who say the same thing. Why didn't anyone teach me this sooner? If this is the first video of mine you've watched, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Every week I put out practical, real-world food knowledge that the industry would rather you never have. Drop a comment below and tell me which spice you're going to try making first. I read every single one. Now let's get into it. The spice industry scam, and why it works so well. The spice industry is a multi-billion-dollar business. In the United States alone, it generates somewhere around $4 billion a year in retail sales. Companies like McCormick, Spice Islands, and a handful of others dominate the market, and they have for decades. Here's the thing about the spice business that most people don't understand. The actual raw ingredient, the dried garlic, the dried chili pepper, the dried herb, is cheap. Incredibly cheap when you're buying it in the quantities these companies buy it. They source their raw materials internationally, often from countries where labor and farming costs are very low. Then they process it, grind it, blend it, package it, and sell it to you at a markup that would make any other industry blush. Let's talk numbers. A pound of dried garlic, real whole dried garlic, costs somewhere between $3 and $5 if you buy it in bulk. 1 pound of dried garlic yields roughly the same amount of garlic powder you'd get from about 8 to 10 of those small commercial jars. Each of those jars retails for somewhere between $4 and $8. Do the math. You're looking at $32 to $80 worth of retail product from $3 to $5 of raw material. That is a markup of somewhere between 600 and 1600%. That's not profit, that's extraction. They're extracting money from you in a way that's so normalized, so built into the weekly grocery run, that most people never stop to question it. Now, to be fair, not all that margin is pure profit. There is real cost involved in processing, packaging, distribution, and retail. But here's what you're actually paying for when you buy a commercial spice. You're paying for the packaging, the glass jar, the metal lid, the shaker insert, the label. You're paying for shelf space because grocery stores charge companies significant fees to be on their shelves. You're paying for the advertising budget. That McCormick ad you saw on TV, you paid for it. You're paying for the distribution network that got that little jar from a factory to a warehouse to a store. And then you're paying for the retailer's margin on top of all of that. By the time you're holding that jar in your hand, the actual spice inside might represent 10 to 15% of what you're paying. Everything else is infrastructure, marketing, and profit for multiple middlemen. But wait, there's more to this scam than just the price. There's also the quality problem. Commercial spices are often ground months, sometimes over a year, before you buy them. From the moment a spice is ground, it starts losing its volatile oils. Those oils are where the flavor and the aroma live. A freshly ground spice is incomparably more potent and complex than the same spice that's been sitting in a jar for 6 months on a warehouse shelf, and then another 3 months on a retail shelf. By the time you buy that garlic powder, crack it open, and sprinkle it into your food, you might be getting maybe 40 or 50% of the flavor you would get from freshly ground. The industry knows this. They count on it. A product with diminished flavor is one you use more of, run out of faster, and have to repurchase sooner. There's also the adulterant problem. Commercial spices have a long and documented history of being cut with cheaper filler materials. Ground pepper cut with papaya seeds, saffron cut with safflower or marigold petals, cumin cut with grass seeds. The FDA has found foreign plant material, insect fragments, and other contaminants in commercial spice samples regularly. This isn't rare, it's widespread. Because the supply chain for commercial spices is long, international, and very hard to audit at every step. When you make your own, you know exactly what's in the jar. Nothing more, nothing less. How to make the basics at home, step by step. Let's start with the equipment because you need to know what you're working with before we get into specific spices. You need two things, a way to dehydrate and a way to grind. For dehydrating, you have two options. A food dehydrator is the best tool for the job. You can find a decent one for $40 to $60 at most hardware or kitchen stores. They're simple machines, a fan, a heating element, some trays. They run at low, consistent temperatures, and they do the work while you're asleep or at work. If you cook regularly and want to do this on any kind of scale, a dehydrator is worth every penny. Your second option is your oven set to its lowest temperature. Most ovens go down to around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Some go lower. That's plenty of heat to dehydrate most vegetables and herbs. It just takes a bit longer and uses more electricity than a dedicated dehydrator. But it works. If you don't want to buy a dehydrator yet, start with your oven. Prove the method to yourself. Then decide if a dehydrator makes sense. For grinding, get a dedicated coffee grinder. A basic blade-style coffee grinder costs $15 to $25. Buy it and use it only for spices. Never put coffee in it. The oils from coffee grounds are nearly impossible to fully clean out, and they'll taint your spices. A dedicated spice grinder is one of the most useful small tools in a DIY kitchen. Now let's make some spices. Garlic powder. Start with fresh garlic. Buy a few heads at the store or the farmer's market. Peel the cloves, slice them thin, about 1/8 of an inch. You want uniform thickness so they dry at the same rate. If you have a dehydrator, lay the slices in a single layer on the trays. Set the temperature to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Let them run for 6 to 8 hours or until the slices are completely brittle and snap when you bend them. There should be no soft or flexible spots. Any remaining moisture will cause your powder to clump and eventually mold. If you're using the oven, spread the slices on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Set your oven to its lowest setting. Prop the door open just slightly with a wooden spoon. This lets moisture escape. Check them every hour or two. Total time is typically 8 to 12 hours. Once the slices are fully dry and brittle, let them cool completely. Then pour them into your spice grinder. Grind in short pulses until you have a fine powder. Sift through a fine mesh strainer. Any larger pieces that don't pass through the strainer go back in the grinder. Repeat until you have a consistently fine powder. That's garlic powder. It smells incredible, it tastes incredible, and it costs you maybe 30 cents to make the equivalent of what a store would charge you $5 or $6 for. Onion powder. Same method, slightly different preparation. Peel your onions and slice them into thin rings or half rings. Separate the layers as best you can. Onions have a higher water content than garlic, so they'll take longer to dry, typically 10 to 14 hours in a dehydrator at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. One warning, drying onions produces a strong smell. If you have a dehydrator, run it in a garage or on a porch if possible. Your whole house will smell like onions for a day if you run it indoors. It's not harmful, just intense. Once fully dry and brittle, grind the same way as garlic. Sift and regrind as needed. Onion powder done. Paprika. Paprika is dried, ground red peppers. That's it. The variation in paprika, sweet, smoked, hot, comes entirely from the type of pepper and whether it's been smoked. For sweet paprika, use sweet red peppers or pimentos. For a hotter version, use a mix with some cayenne or hot red chilies. For smoked paprika, you can smoke your peppers on a grill or smoker before dehydrating, or add a small amount of smoked peppers to your mix. Wash and dry your peppers. Remove the stems and seeds. Slice into strips or rings. Dehydrate at 125 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 to 12 hours until completely brittle. Grind fine. Sift. Done. Smoked paprika from the store can cost $6 or $7 for a small jar. Making your own costs almost nothing if you grow your own peppers, or just $1 or $2 if you buy peppers in season. Cumin. Cumin is a seed spice. You buy whole cumin seeds, which are very inexpensive, especially if you buy them in bulk at a Mexican or Indian grocery store, and you toast and grind them yourself. Put a small dry skillet over medium-low heat. Add your cumin seeds in a single layer. Toast them, stirring constantly for about 2 to 3 minutes. You'll hear them start to pop slightly and the kitchen will smell incredible. Watch them carefully. They go from toasted to burned quickly. When they're fragrant and just slightly darker, pull them off the heat immediately. Pour them onto a cool plate to stop the cooking. Let them cool completely, then grind. Cumin ground fresh from toasted whole seeds is so dramatically better than pre-ground commercial cumin that it's almost a different ingredient. The difference is staggering. Chili powder blend. Classic American-style chili powder is a blend, not a single spice. The base is dried, ground chili peppers, usually a combination of ancho, guajillo, and a little cayenne. Then you add cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, and a touch of oregano. A basic ratio that works well. 4 parts ground dried chili peppers, 2 parts cumin, 1 part garlic powder, 1 part onion powder, half a part dried oregano, quarter part cayenne. Adjust based on your heat preference. For the chili peppers themselves, buy whole dried ancho or guajillo chilies, widely available and inexpensive. Toast them briefly in a dry pan, remove the stems and most of the seeds, tear them into pieces, and grind in your spice grinder. Mix with your other ground ingredients. That's chili powder. Italian seasoning blend. Italian seasoning is one of the easiest to make because it's literally just a mix of dried herbs. Dried oregano, dried basil, dried rosemary, dried thyme, dried marjoram, sometimes dried sage. The best way to do this is to grow your own herbs in the summer. Even a small pot on a windowsill or a few plants outside. Harvest them, dry them, and blend them. But you can also buy bulk dried herbs and blend them yourself, which is still significantly cheaper than buying the pre-blended commercial version. A simple ratio: 3 parts oregano, 2 parts basil, 1 part rosemary, 1 part thyme, 1 part marjoram. Mix thoroughly and store. Done. Total cost for a large jar, maybe 50 cents worth of bulk herbs. Everything bagel seasoning. This one has become very popular in recent years, and stores charge a premium for it. It's just a mix of sesame seeds, poppy seeds, dried garlic flakes, dried onion flakes, and coarse salt. Toast your sesame seeds lightly in a dry pan. Mix together 2 parts sesame seeds, 1 part poppy seeds, 1 part dried garlic flakes, 1 part dried onion flakes, 1 part coarse sea salt or kosher salt. That's it. The hardest part of this recipe is opening the bags. Taco seasoning. Commercial taco seasoning packets are especially egregious. You're paying $1.50 for a small envelope that contains maybe a tablespoon of spices and a lot of starch, salt, and anti-caking agents. Make your own blend. 2 parts chili powder, 1 part cumin, 1 part garlic powder, half part onion powder, half part paprika, quarter part oregano, quarter part black pepper. Mix it up, store it in a jar. Use about 2 tablespoons per pound of meat, exactly like you would with the packet. Total cost to fill a large jar, maybe 60 cents. Total equivalent in store-bought packets, $8 to $12. The math. Let's actually do this. Let me walk you through the real numbers because I think when you see them laid out clearly, it makes the case better than anything else. Let's take garlic powder as our example. At the store, a 3-ounce jar of garlic powder costs around $5 to $8. Let's call it $6. A 3-ounce jar contains roughly 21 teaspoons of garlic powder. Now let's calculate the homemade version. Fresh garlic currently runs about $4 to $5 per pound at most grocery stores. You lose a lot of water weight during dehydration. Fresh garlic is about 60% water. 1 pound of fresh garlic yields approximately 3 to 3.5 ounces of garlic powder. So your cost per ounce of homemade garlic powder is roughly $1.30 to $1.60. Compare that to the store version. The per ounce cost of a $6 jar containing 3 ounces is $2. You're already saving money. But here's where it gets better. If you buy garlic at a farmer's market at the end of the season, when they're selling it by the pound or the braid, you can often get it for $2 to $3 per pound. Now your per ounce cost drops to under $1. You're paying half or less of what the store charges. And the savings compound when you consider the other spices. Whole cumin seeds in bulk from an ethnic grocery store cost about $2 to $3 per pound. That 1 pound of whole seeds will grind into enough cumin to fill at least 6 to 8 commercial-sized jars. The store charges $4 to $5 per jar. You just made $24 to $40 worth of store-price cumin for $3. Taco seasoning. A case of commercial packets contains 24 packets and costs $18 to $20 on Amazon. Each packet seasons 1 pound of meat. To make the equivalent at home, using spices you've already made yourself or bought in bulk, costs somewhere around $2 to $3 total. That's a savings of $15 to $18 per month if your household makes tacos regularly. Italian seasoning. A large commercial jar runs $5 to $6. A pound of bulk dried oregano, which is the primary ingredient, costs about $4 at a restaurant supply store or online, and yields enough dried oregano for 5 or 6 large jars worth of Italian seasoning blend. Add in the other herbs and your cost per jar equivalent is under $1. Now let's look at the annual picture. The average American household spends somewhere around $50 to $150 per year on commercial spices, depending on how much they cook. Let's be conservative and say $80 per year. If you switch to making your own spices at home, even partially just handling the high-use items like garlic powder, onion powder, chili powder, taco seasoning, and Italian seasoning, you could realistically cut that number to $15 to $25 per year for raw materials. That's a savings of $55 to $65 annually. Your startup costs: a food dehydrator at $50, a spare coffee grinder at $20. Total, $70. Payback period, about 1 year. After that, you're saving $55 to $65 every single year for essentially no ongoing effort. And the dehydrator pays for itself again because you can use it for making beef jerky, dried fruit, dried vegetables. The savings snowball fast. If you use the oven instead of buying a dehydrator, your startup cost is just $20 for the coffee grinder. You're profitable in 4 months. This is not a complicated financial case. The math is overwhelmingly in favor of making your own. One of the objections I hear from people when I talk about making your own spices is, but how long will they last? Don't commercial spices have better shelf life? Here's the truth. Commercial spices don't actually have great shelf life once you open the jar. The best buy date on a jar of commercial garlic powder might say 2 or 3 years from the manufacturing date. But that jar sat in a warehouse and on a store shelf before you bought it. By the time it's in your cabinet, you might have 6 to 18 months of useful life left, and that's if you store it well. More importantly, shelf life and potency are not the same thing. A commercial spice might be technically safe to eat for 3 years, but its flavor and aroma compounds, the volatile oils, start degrading immediately after grinding. A jar of pre-ground cumin that's been open for 6 months in your cabinet has maybe 30 to 40% of the flavor punch of freshly ground cumin. Homemade spices, stored properly, can easily last 12 to 24 months with excellent potency. Here's how to store them correctly. Use glass. Always glass. Plastic containers absorb odors and can leach chemicals into your spices over time. Buy a set of small glass jars with tight-fitting lids. Mason jars work great. You can find them at hardware stores, kitchen stores, or online for pennies per jar. Store in a cool, dark place. Heat and light are the enemies of spice potency. Not above the stove, not next to the oven, not in a sunny cabinet. A dark pantry or a drawer away from heat sources is ideal. Keep moisture out. Moisture is how homemade spices fail early. Make absolutely certain your spices are 100% dry before grinding and storing. If they feel the least bit soft or pliable, put them back in the dehydrator. One soft piece in a jar can introduce enough moisture to cause clumping and eventually mold. Label everything with the date. Write the date you made it on the jar with a piece of masking tape and a marker. This gives you a reference point. If something is over 18 months old and seems to have lost its punch, either use it up quickly or make a fresh batch. Trust your nose. If it smells vibrant and strong, it's still good. If it smells like dust, it's done its job. One additional tip. Add a small food-safe silica desiccant packet to each jar if you live in a humid climate. These are the little packets you find in packaging all the time. Save them and repurpose them. They absorb moisture and extend shelf life significantly. A well-made, properly stored homemade spice will outperform a commercial equivalent every single time. It starts fresher, it keeps its potency longer when sealed, and it contains no additives, anti-caking agents, or mystery ingredients. The spice industry built its business on your assumption that making spices at home is complicated, time-consuming, or impractical. It's none of those things. You need about 20 minutes of active work to dehydrate a batch of garlic or onion slices. The dehydrator does the rest on its own. Grinding takes 2 minutes. You end up with a jar of something that is genuinely superior to what you've been paying $5 or $6 for. You know every ingredient in it. You control the freshness. You control the grind size. You control the blend ratios. And you stop funding an industry that has been marking up a staple kitchen ingredient by 600 to 1,000% for decades. The herbs and peppers and seeds that go into spices are among the most accessible raw ingredients in the world. You can grow many of them yourself. You can buy them in bulk at ethnic grocery stores, farmers markets, and restaurant supply stores for a tiny fraction of what you'd pay at a mainstream supermarket for the finished product. The knowledge to transform those raw ingredients into the spices you use every week is not secret or complex. It just hasn't been taught in a way that makes it feel achievable. That's what I'm here for. Start with one spice. Just one. Garlic powder is my recommendation because it's the one most people use the most. The markup is enormous, and it's genuinely easy to make. Buy a couple heads of fresh garlic, slice them thin, run them through your oven on low for 8 hours, grind them in a coffee grinder, put the powder in a jar. The first time you taste food seasoned with your own garlic powder, food you made with something you grew or sourced and processed yourself, something clicks. It's not just about money, though the money matters. It's about understanding where your food comes from and having real control over what goes into it. That's a feeling the industry can't sell you. Now go make some garlic powder. You've got everything you need. Drop a comment below right now and tell me which spice from this list you're going to try making first. Garlic powder? Taco seasoning? Smoked paprika? Let me know. I want to hear from you. And if you've already been making your own spices at home, share your experience in the comments. Your tips and tricks help everyone in this community. If this video opened your eyes to what you've been paying for, hit that like button. It helps more people find this channel and get this information. And if you're not subscribed yet, click that subscribe button right now. Every single week I come back with more practical, real-world food knowledge, DIY preservation, home fermentation, making your own pantry staples from scratch, cutting your grocery bill without cutting your quality of life. I'm Dale Porter. I'll see you in the next one.